Hello there. Game of Thrones Season 7 aired in July of 2017. Unlike previous seasons which had 10 episodes, Season 7 has 7 episodes, though it features some of the longest episodes of the series, with episode 7 running at 81 minutes. This season, Daenerys finally makes it to Westeros and settles in Dragonstone. Jon Snow, knowing that the White Walkers are coming, and knowing that they need more men to fight them, agrees to visit Daenerys in the hopes of forming an alliance, and leaves Sansa to rule Winterfell, as Bran and Arya Stark return. Samwell Tarly is at Old Town training to be a maester, and finds Jorah suffering from greyscale. Cersei is the first ruling queen of Westeros, and Jaime is going off on wars to repay the crown's debts to the Iron Bank. The Hound is travelling with the Brotherhood Without Banners, and has a vision of Eastwatch at the Wall, and they travel that way. This season features the convergence of several plot lines. Daenerys and Jon Snow form an alliance, and they fall in love. I don't really know how I feel about this. The acting between the two is good, and I like the characters. I just don't think that they were written with much sexual chemistry. Though they didn't do the cliché of hating each other at the start, they weren't exactly trusting of each other. But maybe they'll make it work next season. Even though Season 7 is still very good, I'm a bit mixed on it. Even though it features some of the show's strongest elements, I also think that it screws up the most. I will get to what I think doesn't work, but I'll spend more time talking about what does work. One thing that I'm going to talk about is a sex scene. I don't think that I've talked about a specific sex scene before. The one between Grey Worm and Missandei. This has been building for a few seasons. Missandei visits Grey Worm in his quarters, wanting to share goodbyes as he's about to fight in a battle. Grey Worm didn't want to say goodbye as he fears losing Missandei. This is significant as Grey Worm was the bravest Unsullied and has always been fearing of nothing. Missandei strips herself and goes to do this to Grey Worm, who, being castrated, is hesitant. But Missandei is gentle, and they're both naked together. They spend a moment trying to figure out how they can, well, do it. It's a bit awkward, but it should be, and it's surprisingly tender. Another thing that I'll comment on is Isaac Hempstead Wright as Bran Stark, specifically after he becomes the Three-Eyed Raven. His performance is very detached and kind of dead. Normally this would be a negative, but it works here. As someone who sees and hears everything, it would take a lot to surprise him. If I had to compare him to another character, it would probably be Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen. As both characters don't experience time linearly, well, Dr. Manhattan doesn't. For Bran it's a bit different, but I think that the comparison works. At the end of the season, Samwell returns to Winterfell and meets Bran. They share a conversation where they realize that Jon Snow is actually the heir to the Iron Throne and the rightful king of Westeros. Also, his real name is Aegon Targaryen. Bran watches a vision of Jon's parents Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark getting married in secret, as some nice music accompanies it. And Bran Stark's narration actually having some emotion give the scene some more weight as we intercut the scenes of Jon Snow and Daenerys making love. I already said how I feel about this relationship, so moving on. The first Arya scene has it disguised as Walder Frey and poisoning his allies. Arya is one of the series' most compelling, interesting, entertaining, and well-acted characters. Maisie Williams is one of the best actors on the show, being funny, adorable, and scary as fuck. It's genuinely nice to see her reunited with her sister Sansa. Their reunion is stronger than Jon and Sansa's because these two actually had prior scenes together, and back then they were immature children and would often bicker and express hatred towards each other. Seeing them speak to each other with respect and love shows how much these two have grown and learned, and it's nice. Unfortunately, it's also undermined by the most boring plotline of the season. Peter Baelish tries to turn Arya and Sansa against each other, and even though that sounds good, it's not. It also goes on for too long, considering that their brother could fucking tell them about Baelish's fucking conspiracy as soon as he took step one. At least his death scene is satisfying. The Maesters say that Sir Jorah will have a night before they send him to Valyria with the other incurable stone men. So what does Samwell do? He just kills him. It's an appropriately gross and squeamish scene, but... really? That easy? The Maesters do get Sam to copy some important documents that likely have a Chekhov's gun, but Sam eventually learns before he completes his training, and the important information is actually read to him by Gilly. Cersei Lannister makes an alliance with Euron Greyjoy, and being queen she's going a little... nuts. She sleeps with her brother. What else is new? Next morning, her handmaiden arrives to change her bed. Jaime thinks that he needs to hide, but Cersei doesn't think she needs to hide anything, and just lets the handmaiden in with Jaime in sight. In her bed! You're insane! If that wasn't crazy enough, she reveals that she's pregnant again. Jaime asks who she'll say the father is. She says that she'll tell the truth. Speaking of incest, another product of incest rides on her dragon after Cersei's army sacks Highgarden, and she kicks ass while burning all of the Lannisters' loot. Bronn tries to shoot Drogon down with a giant crossbow, but he doesn't make a fatal hit and Drogon just destroys it. It's an awesome scene that effectively shows how much destruction a dragon can do in a real battle. But we don't see the crossbow again this season, and I doubt we'll see it next season. After she returns to Dragonstone, there's a cryptic moment between Drogon and Jon Snow. Drogon roars at Jon until he settles down, and then lets Jon pet him gently as Daenerys watches intently. Okay, I can accept Drogon being nice to him because of his Targaryen blood, but why does Jon pet him? He even calls him and Rhaegon and Viserion beasts. Honestly, I think it'd work if Daenerys climbed off Drogon, took Jon's hand, and then made Jon pet him. Jon later receives a message that the dead are approaching Eastwatch, and decides that he needs to return to Winterfell and just fight for the man he has, even though it's not enough, and Cersei is suspected not to help anyone, especially since most of Westeros think that the White Walkers are extinct or never existed. Tyrion suggests something crazy. Capture a White and bring it to Cersei and prove that the dead are real. A lot of people have called this a stupid idea, but I'm going to defend it. The dead are coming, and almost nobody thinks that the dead are a real threat, or even real. The only force defending the Seven Kingdoms from the White Walkers is the Night's Watch, and they're grossly incapable of fighting them alone. And their only weaknesses are fire and dragonglass. Fire is difficult to control unless you have a dragon, but a dragon itself can be difficult to control, and dragons are not invincible, as we will soon see, and dragonglass is in short supply. Daenerys later says that her conservative estimate for the army of the dead's numbers is 100,000. So, what would be a better idea? This is the main plot of episode 6 of season 7, titled Beyond the Wall, which at the time was the longest episode of Game of Thrones with a running time of 70 minutes. Though it features scenes taking place at Winterfell and Dragonstone, most of it takes place beyond the wall. Jon Snow, Jorah Mormont, Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, Grendy, and the Hound go beyond the wall to capture a White. They eventually find a White Walker followed by White, and after killing the White Walker, all but one White returns to death. As they subdue the White, it releases an ear-piercing screech that's definitely a cry for help. And an army of Whites quickly chase them after Gendry is sent back to Eastwatch to send back the help of Daenerys. Our heroes eventually find safety on a small rock in the middle of a lake, which the Whites can't swim in. Later the lake freezes and the Whites attack. Our heroes put up a decent fight, but they would have been dead at some point if Daenerys hadn't made it with her dragons to save them. But using an ice javelin, the Night King kills Viserion. After our heroes leave, the Whites pull Viserion's corpse out from the lake, and the Night King reanimates him as the episode ends on Viserion's blue eye. It was a good job to drag out the battle a little bit. It makes us worried how long we have to stay here for, putting us in the same mindset as the other characters. And after everyone leaves, we're as relieved and exhausted from this experience as the characters. Benjen Stark being the one to save Jon Snow at the end was pretty contrived. We genuinely feel sorry for Daenerys as she watches Viserion fall. As she said, "They're not beasts to me. No matter how big they get or how terrifying to everyone else, they're my children." And she just had to watch one of her children die. The music that accompanies this scene is heart-wrenching, and the reactions from each character feels authentic. Tommen looks like someone that saw the sun for the first time in his life only for it to disappear a second later. Jorah is emphatically sad. He knows how much Daenerys loved her dragon, and he feels bad for her. And Emilia Clarke's subtle acting is sufficient for us to feel with her. Later, Jon Snow bends the knee to Daenerys on their way back from Eastwatch. Episode 7, titled The Dragon and the Wolf, is the longest episode of Game of Thrones yet, with a running time of 80 minutes. That's almost the length of your average animated Disney movie, which is roughly 83 minutes. Yes, I did the calculations. Cersei agrees to a meeting with Daenerys and Jon and Tyrion and the others in the Dragon Pit in King's Landing. The opening is actually rather pleasant. We have a few characters who haven't seen their friends for a while because their masters are enemies reunite, and it's nice. Tyrion reunites with Bronn and Pod, and the Hound meets Brienne of Tarth again. Though she kicked his ass, he doesn't seem to harbor any ill will, and they even seem to bond a little bit over Arya. Brienne also meets with Jaime, and since I ship them, I love seeing them together. There is an air of awkwardness hovering over these reunions, but it would be awkward. Even though they were friends, now they're essentially enemies. Let's talk about Cersei's wardrobe. In previous seasons, she'd dress in very pretty, very feminine dresses, and have her hair done up likewise. But now, look at her! She looks like a Disney villain. Just look, she's Maleficent. So everyone is in place, and Jon shows Cersei the white, and for the first time in a while, she's visibly terrified as it lunges at her. Cersei agrees that the dead are a concern, but she'll only fight with Daenerys and Jon's forces if Jon stays out of the war between Cersei and Daenerys. But Jon already pledged loyalty to Daenerys, so Cersei backs out. So Brienne has Jaime arrange for Cersei to meet Tyrion. After said meeting, Cersei agrees to fight with Jon and Daenerys. Later, when Jaime is preparing their forces, Cersei says that she never intended to help them. She was lying. Jaime tells her how insane she's being, and that he intends on leaving Cersei to keep his oath. Cersei has the mountain block his way out, and threatens to have him execute Jaime. But Jaime calls her bluff and leaves for Winterfell. A lot of people have said that this demonstrates Jaime's character growth by him keeping his vow. While I do agree that he has had character growth, I disagree with what they're saying. This isn't Jaime keeping his vow. This is Jaime's vows conflicting with each other once again years later. As Jaime said in Season 2, "They make you take so many oaths. Protect the king, obey your father, protect the innocent." These were supposedly the oaths that he took when he joined the Kingsguard during Aerys Targaryen's reign. And they were in conflict when Aerys was going to nuke King's Landing and wanted Jaime to kill his own father. So Jaime had a dilemma: obey your king, kill your father, and let thousands die, or kill your father and save thousands of lives. Jaime, being a sensible person, chose the latter and became the Kingslayer. Now years later, Jaime is facing a similar dilemma: obey your queen and let perhaps millions of people die, or disobey your queen and fight to save millions of lives. This shows that Jaime is once again the knight that he was when he joined the Kingsguard, and that Cersei has become a similarly insane ruler to Aerys Targaryen. Cersei Lannister is the Mad Queen. Season 7 ends at Eastwatch. and we're following Tom and Giantsbane. It's a bit of a dull watch until dark figures start approaching the wall. The watch blows the horn 3 times, as it is the call for White Walkers. Little do they know that something especially deadly is approaching, and not long after, a terrible noise cuts through the night. A scaly bird appears out of nowhere and starts expelling blue fire. Viserion is bringing down the wall with the Night King on his back, and they bring down the wall with the dragon fire. We don't even know if Tormund survived. With the wall finally down, the dead invade the 7 kingdoms, concluding Season 7. And starting a hiatus that rivals Team 4-star. Game of Thrones concludes the next season, so this season had to put the pieces into place, and though it stumbles at times, it hits much more often than it misses. The bringing together of several characters for the first time are just as compelling as the reunitings of several characters that have been separated since Season 4 or Season 1. The reunions of friends, the reunions of family, Brienne and Arya, Tommen and the Hound, Jon Snow and Daenerys. It's all fun to see more of the fantasy in this fantasy series. Yes, the dragons' prominence has been growing as they did, and the White Walkers were in the first scene of the show. But here we get dragons setting zombies on fire, and we see that these ice demons are capable of killing these fire-breathing beasts. The dead aren't really one person's plot anymore. It's the main plot. It's about preparing for the war against them. We have character arcs going full circle. Jaime Lannister disobeys an insane ruler, and the Stark and the Targaryen fall in love as had before, and lost children returning to their homes. And of course, after several thousands of years, mankind must endure another war for the dawn. I greatly enjoyed re-watching and reviewing seasons 1 through 7 of Game of Thrones for this series, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you enjoyed these videos, please like, share, and subscribe. Vala Mogulus.